to always tease about this stuff.
So we're not the first ones that come in here and mic you up and try to get dirt out of you or something.
No, it's been kind of crazy.
Considering you never really had to do that in the past,
the
right?
First, 100 years, no one even knew we were down here. Then all of a sudden, Bourbon got all crazy, and it was like, "Hey, can we come in and do an interview? Can we come in and do a story? Can we do this? Can we, we're doing a documentary." It's like, oh my gosh! It's like.
Hey everyone, this Back to Basics series has been a lot of fun. This episode is going to conclude the series by talking about the magic before the magic. Yes, those glorious copper stills that just don't get enough attention. Our guest tonight was gracious enough to give us behind-the-scenes tour and showed us what he called the heat it and beat it treatment that goes into the fashioning copper to take the shapes of the stills. It's truly an art that goes into making them and look as good as they do. Make sure you check out all the pictures on our Instagram page at Bourbon Pursuit. We're happy to announce a new partnership with the Kentucky Derby Museum to bring all the Bourbon Legends series that are hosted by Fred Minnick to our podcast. These will be seasonal releases, and to really get the most out of the experience, and also to get a chance to drink the bourbon, you've just got to be there in person. The next event will take place on April 20th and will feature the president of Old Forester, Campbell Brown. Tickets are $75 per person, or $65 if you're a museum member, and they can be purchased online at derbymuseum.org. To keep the show going, please take a minute and support us on Patreon. We've got sponsorships starting at just $1 a month that gets you unedited footage, koozies, and of course, limited edition Bourbon Pursuit t-shirts. Visit patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. Ed Bly and Rising Tide Spirits are back again with a new release of Old Stubborn Bourbon. And this release of Old Stubborn is a premium hand marriage of 10, 11, and 12-year cask strength, barely filtered pot still bourbon. It comes in at a staggering 123.8 proof. And the flavoring grain for this one, which the last one was wheated, but this time it's now rye. Rich, sweet, and bold with a long finish that's sure to be another eye-opener. You can order online at Sealbox or thebourbonconcierge.com, and you can even purchase in person at Revival Vintage Spirits, and even now with very few select stores in Kentucky. You can get it now while you can, but be sure to do it because it's not going to last long. From their bar to yours, Chad and Sarah of the popular YouTube channel It's Bourbon Night bring you their favorite at-home old-fashioned mix with the new Elemental Elixirs Golden Hour Syrup. It's a custom-made syrup with notes of bold black tea, warm spices, and orange zest. All you need is your favorite whiskey and ice. No bitters needed. One bottle makes 16 drinks, so that's only $1 a cocktail before you add your own whiskey. They can also be enjoyed in other cocktails or spirits, mocktails, coffee, tea, and anything you can think of. It's crafted locally in Lexington, Kentucky, and you can get your bottle now at whiskeyambitions.com. Do you ever pour yourself a bourbon, swirl it around, and then start struggling to come up with tasting notes? And perhaps you're also looking for a good Father's Day gift idea. Well, you can now solve both with a kit from Knows Your Bourbon. And unlike other nosing kits on the market, Knows Your Bourbon kits feature real ingredients for the most authentic aromas. You can smell real Tahitian vanilla bean instead of some synthetic aroma that's just made from chemicals. So head on over to knowsyourbourbon.com and enter code BP10 for 10% off your order.
Play Whiskey Wednesday Round 11, the memory game. Until June 26, each week you can win one of our 12 incredible grand prizes. Select 2 doors at checkout, and if they match on drawing night, you'll win that bottle. Not a match? No worries. You still score a Weller 12-year. Every $5 ticket gives you 5 chances to win, including 4 weekly bonus prizes. Get your tickets now at give270.org. Charitable Gaming License ORG 0002703.
Always find what you love at Total Wine & More. With so many great bottles to choose from at the lowest price, it's easy to find your favorite Cabernet or a new single-barrel bourbon to try with some help from one of their friendly guides. And with every bottle comes the confidence of knowing you just found something amazing. With the lowest prices for over 30 years, find what you love and love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Curbside pickup and delivery available in most areas. Visit TotalWine.com to learn more. Spirits not sold in Virginia and North Carolina. Drink responsibly and be 21. Welcome back to the episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. Kenny here today, and we are in downtown Louisville, and I've actually got a return guest co-host with me, so I'm glad to bring back to the show Lyndon Ferguson, Lyndon Ferguson. Last time I said Lyndon Johnson, I was like, wait a second. So Lyndon, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
So for anybody that hasn't listened to Lyndon before, you can catch him on a past episode when we interviewed Brent Elliott as well as Elizabeth McCall. So give people a little reminder about who you are and how you got into bourbon yourself.
Yeah, so I started partaking in bourbon, when I was younger in college, and back then it was just the standard Jim Beams and the Maker's Mark. And as I grew to enjoy it, I started to get to know the different products that are out there. Even more so when I started working on the retail side and managed a large chain liquor store here in Louisville. And I really got to know the master distillers, the products, the flavors, the behind the scenes things that happen in distilleries. And so this is an honor for me to be here because you get to see, without Vendome, this whole industry doesn't happen, and it's really cool to see. So appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, this is gonna be a good episode because this one might be the tail end of our back to basics month. So if there's one thing that bourbon, whiskey, moonshine, and other spirits have in common, it's our guest today. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce him. His name is Mike Sherman. Mike is the owner of Vendome Copper and Brass Works. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So before we get into it and start talking about family lineage and what we do here. Do you drink? Like, what do you like bourbon? I mean, do you like bourbon just because business is good right now, or do you have do you like bourbon or whiskey or anything like that even before business was good?
I do drink, and I do love bourbon, and in fact, it's pretty safe to say that my wife and I have a bourbon every night when we settle down, and after the kids have gone to bed, and we're kind of just relaxing, and usually we got a bourbon in our hand, enjoying the evening.
Absolutely. Well, that's good. So let's go ahead and talk about the business a little bit. So for those listeners who have never even heard of Vendome, right? Because this is back to basics. They're just understanding what copper and grains and all these other things mean. So give them an idea of what you all do here and why it is important.
So Vendome Copper and Brass Works, we're a sheet metal fabricator. So we're taking, mostly flat sheet and forming it into either copper pot stills or copper continuous columns for distillation, which is how you go about stripping the alcohol out of a fermented mash to create a bourbon. So we were been around for 4 generations, always located right here in Butchertown, Louisville, Kentucky. And business is good and loving life.
That's also good. That's good to have. So I guess talk a little bit more about, do you make just stills here? I mean, what else do you guys do here besides just making things that essentially just get you drunk all the time?
So over the years, when about 1903, 1904, Vendome was started by my great-grandfather. Mostly the distilling industry and some breweries. But over the years, we've had to branch out. We're in the chemical industry, pharmaceutical, confectionery, so lots of different areas. Once stainless steel became popular, we branched out into the stainless steel and other high nickel alloys. So we do quite a bit of work in other industries. It just happens that the distilling industry is pretty much dominating our shop right now.
And so I guess that's a good question or a good thing to kind of push to you, is to say that, one thing that you would notice if you go to any distillery pretty much around Kentucky, I would say at least a solid 90 to 95%, you go through and you see the stills, most of them, if not all of them, are coming from you, right? The big guys, Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, all of them.
Yeah. A lot of the distilleries have all of our equipment on the distillation side in it. Some of the older distilleries have a lot of our equipment, but then they still have a couple old stills that may not be ours, but hopefully one day they'll be replacing those and they will be ours. And we had a lot of competitors in the Louisville and Cincinnati area back in the early days and everything. And for whatever reason, we were able to keep our doors open over the past century and in these other places. for one reason or another, decided to shut down, or maybe it was prohibition. They didn't survive that, or we were fortunate enough to where we saw the writing on the table during a few decades there where we knew we had to branch out or we weren't going to make it. And luckily the leadership of probably more or less my father and uncle, Dick, went out there and started getting into those other industries. So we had work to keep the doors open.
So with that, I kind of want to rewind a little bit because you've talked about you're the fourth generation person here, and your sister here who actually introduced us in the room. But you also said through Prohibition. So kind of let's rewind back a lot further and kind of talk about the origins of Vendome. Like, where did it start? What was the reason it started, and how did it end up here, or whatever it is?
So my great-grandfather actually worked for a company that was had a division in Louisville, but was based out of Cincinnati. And he started, I think, as a bookkeeper and worked himself up to actually, I think he was listed as the vice president at one point. And the company decided to close its Louisville division for whatever reason. And my great-grandfather saw enough business here in this region to keep something open. So whether he bought that division or just went down the street and opened up his own, we're not really sure the details. But next thing we know, Vendome was showing up in some trade magazines and everything. And we've got some dated documents and everything from that 1904 area to where Vendome was created. We started on Main Street, just 2 blocks away from where we are right now. Prohibition hit. Naturally, a lot of things changed then. Some distilleries were able to operate for medicinal purposes and things like that. And so we were able to keep some of those customers and maintain them. I do know that our great-grandfather went to Canada for about a year with his family and put up a distillery up there. We know that he also teamed up with some other companies in Louisville, did some pump work, also did some boiler work. So it sounded like he was doing whatever it took to keep the doors open. And then Prohibition ended, things took off again. Then my grandfather came into the business and kept everything running. And then, the third generation came in, my father and uncle. And bourbon, wasn't always that attractive, sexy drink that it is now. Most master distillers back then wasn't too keen on drinking bourbon unless it was, neat on the rocks or with a splash of water. You never mixed it with Coke or fruit juices or anything like that you're seeing these mixologists do nowadays. So back then, bourbon, vodka was introduced and vodka was the big boom and everything. And so bourbon wasn't really growing too much. We weren't doing a whole lot of expansions and everything. We were just kind of maintaining equipment, replacing equipment maybe when it wore out, but no expansions. In the late 70s, early 80s, the first gasohol boom hit. And that's really what I guess, escalated our business to a new level. We had to start putting up some pretty big buildings, manufacturing buildings. We were building 11-foot, 12-foot, 12.5-foot diameter columns for, people like Archer Daniels Midland, ADM out in the Midwest, and other Midwest companies that were putting up gasohol plants. My uncle and dad still say, that while we're busy now, they're not sure we're as busy as we were in the late 70s, early 80s when we were working 3 shifts over in the shop just to get, that gasohol equipment out of here. That went through a boom and definitely propelled us into some new, bigger buildings and everything. And then it was about that time also we were getting into the chemical industries and some other industries as well. Rubber Town here in Louisville's got a lot of different chemical plants. We're an ASME code stamp shop that allows us to do pressure vessels, which is big in the chemical industries. And there's a lot of shops in Louisville that don't have that code stamp. So that opened up some doors for us and allowed us to get into those areas. And of course, bourbon, 7, 8, 9 years ago, all of a sudden you just started seeing it boom again. All the big distilleries started expanding. And then all of a sudden the craft distilling industry started coming on board. And it's been very busy since then.
That's not a bad thing to have. So I guess I want to rewind back again, and even to the early, because the origin of copper stills is not really even able. You're not able to find it, like who made the first one or kind of how it came about. But I want to talk about, what it talks about from a manufacturing process. When your great grandfather was running this, was it a big process of trial and error when you start making something to figure out like, oh, this is not going to work, or maybe we can tweak this and make it better? And how is that led in today? Is it essentially copy paste, or is it or are you still trying to figure out ways to make it more efficient?
Of course, back when the pictures that we have of our old shop and everything in the early 1900s, they're all pot stills, which is funny because now we've gone back to a lot of people doing the pot stills. They're all riveted seams and lead solder and all this stuff. And they really don't look too different than what some of the ones that we're building now when we do a pot still for a customer. I'm not really sure when the first pot still or anything came on board, but I do know back in the late 1700s when George Washington was distilling at Mount Vernon in Virginia, he had a set of pot stills, about 5 pot stills that ranged from 70 to 95 gallons pots. And I know that because we were able to duplicate those when they redid the George Washington distillery some 5, 6, 7 years ago. The pot still has been around forever. The continuous still, came about years later and was probably a more workhorse. Was able to be fed in continuously. It wasn't batch; it was continuous. It probably put out a little bit more of a consistent product once you got it up and running. And again, the stills that we were building 40 and 50 years ago on the continuous side are very similar to the stills that we're building now. Everyone has their little tweaks on what they want. All the distilleries have a little bit different sizes or different amount of internal trays or something like that, but they're very similar in a lot of ways, though.
I guess that's another good question, because Terry Bone and Brent Melvin, they both had this similar kind of question. They said, like, how customized can you make these products? And when you do customize it, can you customize it for like a specific flavor profile? Is that even possible? Or is it just kind of, just a slight nuance that really just might make a difference in somebody's imagination versus the actual outcome?
Right. A lot of the flavoring comes into the fermentation process, the types of grain, the types of yeast. Distilling does play a part of it as far as what proof you might be bringing over your product, the amount of congeners that you're keeping in your product and not stripping out of it. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to change the flavor profile, not just in the distilling, but all the way across the board. So we have done a lot of different types of stills. We are a custom fabricator. We take great pride in that. We don't make one type of still, put it on a shelf, and when someone calls, there it is. We like to be custom. We want every still to look a little bit different. And if someone has an idea of a certain type of still that might distill a little bit different, then we can make it for them.
I guess humor me, like what would be the difference in those ideas, right? Because I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't know, because for me, I'd call and be like, what do you have on the shelf?
Right.
So I guess give me some idea of what somebody would want to say, and they say, I want to make this like a little bit different and tweak this area. Like, what are those areas and what would be different?
A lot of times the customization comes into customers call us and they already have a building. So they're like, okay, we got a building and we want to put in a still. And they're like, we got really tall ceilings. It's like, oh, great. You need tall ceilings. How tall are your ceilings? They're like 10 foot. It's like, wow, that's not very tall. So
need a sunroof.
all of a
Cut a
sudden
hole
we're
in the
making a wider diameter and a squattier pot still, and we may take the column that usually sits on top of it and take it over and set it on the side of it, and so sometimes the geometry of a person's building leads to what their still is going to look like, and naturally everyone wants to show off their equipment. They get into the business. Maybe they have a love for bourbon and whiskey and they want to make that, but they also want to have tours and people come in and everything. So, where the tri box or the tail box is, they're always trying to jazz that area up and try to make something different for that. And we tell people, draw it out. If you got a logo that you want to try to duplicate or you got something, that in your mind, put it on paper and let's do it, because we can do it. It, may cost a little more, but we can do it. So we've done some, we've got one tail box out there that's got a moving figurine in it. As the distillate comes over the paddle, it moves a guy that actually looks like he's pushing a barrel. That's unique. There's no one else out there that's got anything like that. Mm-hmm. And that's what we like to do. We love to customize.
So is there any kind of innovation going on, right? Because this is an art, a craft that's been around for centuries, right? So is there any more innovation that kind of goes on, or is it just kind of just a lot of tweaking, or kind of, like you said, just this customization of little things?
I think, we've had some people call and say they've got new technology or they can do this or they can do that. They can age faster. They can, and the one thing I think that we probably learned by working with all the people in the different distilleries and the master distillers and the people who really have been doing it all their lives is sometimes there's just no shortcuts that can be taken to make a great product. There are some technologies out there to advance the aging along, and the whiskeys they're good. I mean, I've tasted them; they're not bad; they're good. But I think more and more people just come back to wanting the product that's been made the old-fashioned way, put in a barrel, aged the old-fashioned way, and when the master distiller says it's ready, then that's when it's ready, and that's what people want. Sure, there's always little tweaks and things during the process or throughout the process that can be changed a little bit to change some things, but nothing really major. I mean, we haven't come across anything major. No one's really brought any major things to us. It's pretty much still the same process it's been forever.
So when sticking with tradition, why is copper the element of choice and not stainless steel or, as you said, other kind of nickel alloys or whatever it is? Like, what makes copper that element that does whatever the magic that happens?
Yeah. Well, lucky for us, back in the 1700s and the 1800s, stainless wasn't around. So copper was available, and that's what people used. And copper smithing was it was everywhere. Every corner had a shop on it that could do some copper smithing. And it just started that these vessels and everything were made with copper. And everyone knew copper was a great heat transfer metal. So they didn't realize back then, though, that there was actual reaction between a fermented mash and the copper that actually keeps some sulfurs and sulfides and odors and stuff behind in the still that you don't want coming over your product. And so if you go to any of the bourbon distilleries in Kentucky, I'll just, in the Tennessee whiskey distilleries down in Tennessee, you're going to see a lot of copper. Even the places, there's some distilleries who have stainless steel, but somewhere in that process, they have copper to where all that distillate and all that vapor goes through copper. So all those sulfurs and sulfides and things you don't want in your product gets pulled out and left behind. So, for us, I tell people all the time, the good news is copper is needed in the process, and copper also wears out. I mean, over time, all that copper does, it's not like stainless. Stainless, even though we found out it's not a forever metal, stainless will last longer than copper, but it doesn't have the reaction that copper has.
If you're anything like me, then you can't get enough about bourbon. And that's why I'm a subscriber to Bourbon Plus magazine. Bourbon Plus is a quarterly publication that tells the stories from the heart of bourbon, the farmers who grow the grain, the distillers who labor over the process, and the people like you and me who raise their glasses to celebrate it all. Subscribe to Bourbon Plus magazine today at bourbonplus.com, that's PLUS.com, and use code PURSUIT at checkout for $5 off your subscription. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. Shopify's point of sale is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. And with Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns, from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. And get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone. Transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's point-of-sale Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning 24/7 help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/bourbon, all lowercase, and go to shopify.com/bourbon to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/bourbon. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you're the person in this room that's gonna know more about copper than anybody else, right? So does the saying hold true that it actually costs more to make a penny than its actual value?
I think the amount of copper actually in a penny is pretty low. So
I guess what else makes Vendome unique in what you all do? Because it's always one thing to be able to go to a distillery and you see the presentation, right? You see the way the still sits there and it's magnificent, whatever you would call it, and it's ivory tower over in the corner, right? Because it literally is. It's a copper tower at that point. So, I mean, what makes it look so great and all those other kind of things that you do to make it unique?
Copper in itself, I think everyone is drawn to it. I mean, if you go in to a brewery or a distillery that has shiny copper, the first thing everyone wants to do is reach out and touch it. They want to touch it. And I don't know why, but, and it's funny because, you go to some places and they got big signs, please do not touch the copper, because the oil is off your finger. As soon as you touch that, you come back the next day.
You have to clean it.
Yeah. There's fingerprints right there on it.
It's like the button that says "Do not push."
Yeah, right. Yeah, so they're all intrigued with the copper and everything. We've been working with copper for over 100 years, and the fact is, there's not a whole lot of places that do that type of work anymore. I consider us an industrial fabricator. We don't take real light gauge copper and bend it and solder it and rivet it and stuff like that. We got 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 3/16 inch. I mean, we got vessels that we've made for the chemical industry up to 1/2 inch thick copper.
Holy smokes.
I mean, it is some serious industrial thickness of metal. We TIG weld it. It is, we TIG weld it with 99.99% copper filler metal. And TIG welding copper is something that you're not going to just go around anywhere in the country and find. We get tons of phone calls from certain customers who may be out west or, not within driving distance of us. And they'll call and say, hey, we got a guy here that says, we got a little pinhole leak in our coil. He says he can weld anything. Will you talk to him about weld repairing this? And we always say, we'll talk to him, but you're probably going to call us back needing it to be fixed. And sure enough, within a day or two, they call and say, hey, can you get a guy out here? This didn't work. It's just just a different metal. It's a different beast. We don't hire copper welders. We make copper welders. We hire great workers, great welders in stainless and carbon steel and stuff like that. And then if we can get them on the copper and they can pick it up, then we keep working with them and they become a copper welder. If they don't pick it up, then they just stay on stainless and carbon steel. Not everyone can weld it.
So I was also reading you guys do some things like acid washing and satin finishes and stuff like that. So talk about that and what that does to the overall product.
Yeah. So after working with the copper, again, because of the heat that goes into the copper, it comes in pretty much all nice and shiny and everything. But then by the time we're done with it, there's heat marks all over it, and it looks horrible, actually. I mean, it's been fabricated on. It's been worked on. So we do a light phosphoric acid wash on the copper that will take it back to its natural copper look. What we call our standard satin finish is just a light polish that gets everything uniform, and puts a little bit of a polish on it, but it looks really nice. But we can take it all the way up to a mirror finish. You wake up in the morning, go brush your teeth and shave in it. I always kind of tend to tell people that it's more expensive to fabricate that, and it's more expensive to maintain that, because copper is going to, just in its sitting outside, it's going to patina. It's going to darken over time, no matter how shiny it is at the beginning. So if you're not going to continue to rub on it and polish it, then it's going to darken. So there are different types of finishes we can do on it. The more we polish on it, the more expensive it is, because it's all labor intensive to polish.
I would imagine, because they're not small. Right? No. You got to get on ladders to polish those things.
And
right?
You got to get it uniform. You can't have this part over here being a little different than this part over here. It's got to be perfect, especially when you go to a mirror finish. It's got to look uniform all the way around that thing. So it can be
a little intensive.
Quite an experience.
Yeah. What about, talk to us about how the price of copper has changed over the years, because two or 3 years ago, we would see news reports of people stealing copper from air conditioners, from whatever, to sell it. So how does the price of copper, how does it change? How does it affected you? How does it affected new distilleries and their purchase habits from you?
Yeah, copper is a traded commodity. I mean, it's when we buy copper, it is based on the what copper is trading for that day. So if we're buying copper from a mill, there's the copper base price, or the metal price, plus a fabrication price to take that copper and make it into the sheet size and thickness that we want. So, if copper goes up, it can jump 10, 15, 20, 30 cents in a week. So luckily over the last couple years, it's been pretty steady. It has started to creep back up here a little bit over the past few months. But, I'm trying to think 5-6 years ago, the base metal of copper was over $5 or $6 a pound. In scrap copper, you could take a piece of scrap copper and get $4 a pound from the scrap yard. So that's when people were going in and taking the plumbing out of houses being built, and air conditioning coils, and cutting electric, and sometimes not turning the electric off. There's quite a few accidents, I think. Yeah. And we had people that would walk up in the middle of the day and run into our shop and just grab a piece of copper if it was sitting there, broad daylight. So right now, I would say the base price of metal of copper right now is probably in the $260 to $275 range. But yeah, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was pretty high. People know they have to have the copper. I mean, they know they have to have it somewhere. I mean, like, if one of our big customers calls who has a copper still and it needs to be replaced, they're not going to, change it to stainless because copper is at an all-time high. Because I guarantee you quality is going to call them and say, hey, why is this different now? There's a different taste in this. Why? And that's the last thing they want to do is be inconsistent on the product that they make.
And you might not know for 4 years.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. I mean, they'll taste the distillate off of the still, and they'll start to say, okay, this isn't quite right. What's going on? But you're right. I mean, 4 years from now, after it comes out of a barrel, if it's different, that's even a bigger problem.
So talk about, and this is going to be a loaded question. I know it is. So if I'm a new distiller and I say, okay, I need to get a pot still, or I need to get a column still, or whatever I want to get from you, because you can make magic happen with whatever I want to put down on paper. What's the average time or the lead time it would take for me to say, like, okay, like here's my purchase order. Like, when can I get off and running with this thing?
Yeah, right now we're about 8 to 10 months out. On new, startups like a craft distiller. We were about a year and a half ago, we were probably 12 months out. And so we've really worked hard to try to get that back to an 8 to 10 month period. We find that most people who are starting a new distillery need 8 or 10 months to get their permits and all their all the local permits and then their buildings and getting everything in place. You can't even to get going with your distilling permit, federal distilling permit. You need to have the serial numbers of the equipment to issue your permit application. So usually people are ordering with us, and then we'll issue the serial numbers for the equipment that we're going to build for them, and then they use those serial numbers to get the application going.
So what's like the actual manufacture time? Like if once you have the raw materials in here and you got people pounding away with it, or using machines to bend it in whatever ways you have to do, like what's a manufacture time for being able to get something?
Depending on the size, but I would say on average probably a 3 to 4 month period.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So it's nothing that you're doing like in a week or anything.
No.
But you're also working with other companies to connect all of the stills and things to the piping, to the fermenters, to the cookers and all that. So, I mean, there's a lot of
moving pieces. It's a mousetrap. It's like a mousetrap game, right? Yeah. There's a lot of things going on.
Yeah. There's we found out a long time ago that most customers want to come in and just do one-stop shopping. They don't want to go here for this and here for this and over here for this and over here for that. They just want, if the more we can provide, the happier they are. So, we can provide everything through cookers, to the fermenters, to the distillation equipment, to any stainless steel tanks that are needed throughout the process, to the tail boxes and tasting boxes and stuff like that, all the way. But we've also aligned ourselves with people who provide boilers, people who provide chillers, some of the grain handling equipment that's needed. We can give people. When we're on the phone with them, it's like, here, call these people. They know what they're doing. We've dealt with them before, and so now all of a sudden that puzzle goes together a lot easier. And that has been great. Probably one of the best things we've done is be able to start pulling everything together. We've aligned ourselves with about 6 or 8 different consultants, people who have worked in the distilling industry their whole lives and maybe retired, but yet still want to be doing something. So, if I got somebody who comes in and they're putting a nice project together, yet they seem like they might need a little bit more help, I'll line them up with one of our consultants and they'll work with them hand in hand and help them with the grain bill and the startup and everything, getting the thing up and running as well. So we try to provide as much to the customer as possible to help them out a lot.
Yeah, you found a niche there.
Along with that, so if Kenny and I wanted to start our own distillery,
which we're not.
We're not.
It sounds like a bad investment. But okay.
Yeah. But if we did, and if it's just a small craft distillery, just very small, maybe a 1,000 barrels a year or something like that, how much capital would we need to raise to start our own craft distillery before we hire employees, before we bought the grains, just strictly built the distillery itself? I've always wanted to know that.
I would
loaded question right there.
Yeah. It's funny because it's the building and everything just is quite expensive in the whole thing. But it's funny because when people see, so-and-so is building a $50 million distillery and brand new and all this stuff. And so my friends will call me and say, man, are you getting that equipment? And I'll be like, yeah, we got the distillation equipment. They're like, man, things must be good. And I'm like, okay, well, our part of it's about $1 million. So I don't know where that other 49 million is going, but but in, probably 1,000 barrels, maybe in the $750,000 range, to get something going, and put something together.
There you go.
Yeah.
Make your dream come true. Yeah, start cashing all the kids' college funds, right?
Yeah.
So last thing I want to kind of talk about is kind of the business model itself kind of strikes me as interesting, right? Because you make a product, and this product, most of the stills, right? I mean, and the tail boxes, like this stuff it's meant to last like decades, right? I mean, it's not like you're gonna need a new one like in 3 years, right? I mean, so it seems that it's a one big time sell, and then from there on, is it a lot of maintenance? Like, and how long is it going to be able to take until you get an opportunity to resell a new still?
Well, like I said earlier, copper wears out, which is good for us. The grain, it's coarse, it's grit, it's got the grain in it. So as it's flowing through that column still, it is going across those internal trays and just wearing them out. So I usually tell people that a column still, under normal operating conditions will probably last 15 to 20 years. And a lot goes into that. If you're running it, hard, if you're pushing it to the maximum, if you're doing a lot of heavy cleaning with caustic solutions, then that could go down to 10 to 12 years. But then a set of trays, the internals, will probably halfway through the life of that still need to be replaced. So we'll go in, pull the top off, pull all the internal trays out, put a new set of trays in it. It will run another 7 or 8 years. And then by the time another set of trays is due to be replaced or put in, normally the shell is about shot. So then at that point, the whole column needs to be replaced. So
it's pretty cyclical then, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, like we know when the big distilleries, we pretty much know their schedule, when they're going to need a new still, or when they're going to need new trays, and we start early with them. I mean, because copper can be a long lead item. I mean, one of the mills we order from, our larger sheet of copper takes up to 20 weeks to get copper in. So we'll start, in the fall and start talking to all the major distilleries about their schedule for next year. Any expansion, any tray work, any column work, any condensers, what's on your schedule? What do you think is going to be on your schedule? So we can make a copper order by, just after the beginning of the year. So it's all in here ready to go when they're, calling us saying, okay, this is what we need. We've got the copper already here. Most of the copper work we've done in the big distilleries over the last 5 or 6 years all been expansion. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know one major distillery in Kentucky and Tennessee that hasn't expanded over the past 5 or 6 years. Some of them have already done it twice. It's a good thing, and
business is very good.
It is, and it's good for it's great to see. It's great to see the bourbon industry doing so well. I mean, especially being someone who was born in Kentucky and lived here all my life, and I mean, naturally, when you think of Kentucky, I mean, bourbon's one of those things you think of. Usually bourbon and horse racing and basketball. Those are about the three things that everyone thinks of when they think of Kentucky. And so for the bourbon industry to be doing so good, all the visitor centers that have popped up and the Bourbon Trail and everything, and the amount of tourists that are coming through
amazing.
Here, it is.
I mean, they're building a new hotel downtown right now because we need more rooms to have people here. So
yeah, so it's great to see, and it's a fun time. A lot of people say we're still in the first part of a 20 or 25 year boom. I don't know. I don't think that really includes us. I think fabricating will eventually slow down. So we'll just have to find that next niche and be ready for it.
Right.
And be ready to expand.
So last question I want to ask, because you were talking about the copper and how it, basically disintegrates, right? With all so I guess how often are people within the distilleries, like either doing maintenance on them or kind of knowing exactly like, I mean, you said it's kind of cyclical, right? So you're kind of almost doing like preventive maintenance when you're doing this, right? I mean, how often is something going to happen where they're like, oh, we've got a, you know, a pinhole in our column still, like, do we need to shut this down and get somebody out here to start welding this thing so we can bring it back up online? Like, is that an actual thing? Does that actually occur?
It just depends on the size of that pinhole. You know, if it's something major, then they'll shut down immediately. If it's something that's not major, then most distilleries will be down at least part of a day, 1 day a week, and then they'll address it on that day. Every distillery has a quote unquote summer shutdown. I say summer shutdown because it used to be distilleries depended so much on creek waters and lake waters and everything like that during the summer those waters got too warm. They had to shut down. That was before cooling towers and chiller systems and everything like that. So now certain summer shutdowns really aren't till like September and things like that. But most distilleries have at least a couple of weeks up to a month major shutdown a year, to where that's when they go in and do all the major maintenance. But little pinhole leaks, little fixes. I mean, I've got a crew going somewhere tomorrow, to a distillery that's got an issue. We do field work. I got people out in the field all the time at the distilleries, at the breweries. Anheuser-Busch is one of our biggest customers. We work on their copper coils and all their cookers across the United States all the time. And again, because they can't find someone to come in and fix a pinhole leak. So when Jacksonville, Florida's got a pinhole leak, I got 2 guys jumping in a truck driving 12 hours down there overnight to fix it.
I was about to say, I thought they'd raise their hand like, Florida, yeah, get me the hell out of Kentucky, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. They drive 12 hours, get out, fix it, get a room, sleep for a while, and drive back. They may only do 2 hours of work, but they were gone 25, 26 hours.
Right.
So I have one final question for you. You've made products for virtually all the distilleries in Kentucky and other states, but if you can tell Kenny and I, what's your favorite sipping bourbon and what's your favorite bourbon period?
I don't think I can do that. To me, it's what's the event? What's the occasion? Is it tailgate? I'm drinking something different. If it's an after dinner drink by the fire, I'm sipping something different. Which that's what I love about bourbon, because you got all these different types of bourbons for different occasions, and that's what I truly love about it. So I got a well-stocked bar at home, and depending on the occasion, I'm getting whatever it is that it calls for. But
nice.
A free bourbon is always good.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, you got a well-stocked bar in this office.
Yeah.
We saw Weller Centennial bottles.
Absolutely.
So if people want to learn more about Vendome, and are you guys even open for tours?
We do mint julep tours. We'll do sidewalk tours. They'll bring people by and take them out and kind of do a sidewalk tour of our area. If someone has a really special event, they can go through Mint Julep, and we could open it up for a special tour if it's something. But because we're a manufacturer and there's welding and cutting and grinding and all that going on,
Steel-toed boots.
It's tough to bring people through, and so mostly it's from afar that you can check us out. But we got a website, vendomecopper.com. It's got a lot of cool pictures and we try to keep that up to date of some of the stuff that we're doing and working on. So yeah, it's like I said, 10, 12 years ago, no one even knew we were down here, and then we were here for 100 years in this area and no one knew it. And then now all of a sudden it's like, can we come by and do a tour? So
yeah, now you're the president and the PR person, and
put this hat on today, this hat on tomorrow.
Right, absolutely. So Mike, I want to say pleasure. Thank you again for being on the show.
Yep.
If you do like what you hear, make sure you support the show on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. We always love to be able to send new swag out, koozies, stickers, t-shirts, all those kind of great things. So make sure you support the show. And, you can follow Vendome Cooper on Twitter at Vendome Cooper. You can also follow us at social media at Bourbon Pursuit on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you have any other show suggestions or people would like to hear, make sure you send us to it's TheDuo, THEDUO at bourbonpursuit.com. Lyndon, I want to say thank you again for
My pleasure.
guest co-hosting today. This was a pleasure, and glad you get to come here and see yet another stop. Right? I mean, this is a first for us. It's probably going to be the only time we're ever going to have a still maker on here. I can guarantee that. Unless for some odd reason we're going to have you back on again in 6 months to see what's new, right? But
My pleasure.
awesome. And then y'all make sure you tune in next week.